Welcome to the Dance Centre podcast. I am your host, Claire French, and I'm joining you from the traditional unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish and Tsleil-Waututh peoples, also known as Vancouver, Canada. I'll be talking to dancers, choreographers and other members of the dance world here on the West Coast to find out more about their creative work and practices and to discuss what it means to us to be dance professionals today. Thanks for joining us. Winnipeg-born Sophie Dow is a multidisciplinary creative inspired by dance music, collaboration and Métis, Assiniboine and settler roots. An avid adventurer, Sophie has a passion for busking, yoga and travelling on top of holding a degree in dance performance and choreography from York University, Toronto. She is Artistic Associate of Odella Arts, Matriarchs Uprising, Vigny Dancy and the Chimera Project. She is also Creative Director of PEC's Flight Festival of Contemporary Dance and curator of Concurrence gatherings. I talked to Sophie about her numerous roles, her creativity, her history, and her future plans. So let's start by just acknowledging that you are in a very busy coffee shop at the moment, and I'm catching you between jobs, between different roles that you fill your time with. And it's really exciting to get to speak to you about all of the things you do. Let's start, if we can, as far back as you are willing to go in terms of your personal dance history, and maybe a little bit about how you started in dance and then how you came to Vancouver to kind of give it a round introduction to you.
Of course. Well, thank you so much for having me on the podcast. It's an absolute honor. I've been listening to it for quite some time, so it's cool to be here.
Great.
So thank you. I guess I've always been dancing, really. I kind of rolled out, and I was adopted at birth, and my adoptive parents were always very nurturing as far as my movement practice, and I never really crawled much. I kind of went right from rolling on the floor to walking, so that was always a running joke in my modern dance classes, why I liked rolling and floor work so much. And then pretty well as soon as my legs worked, I was in a jolly jumper, and there was never a time in my childhood home, which is in Winnipeg, where I grew up and was raised, trained. There's never a time that there wasn't music playing. There was CDs or cassettes or lots of times records, and so there's always sonic movement and physical movement, and it's just very embedded in my life. And then when I was about 2.5, I was just about 3. It was December, my birthday's in March, and then it was like December 1997, I guess it would have been. My Nana and Papa brought me to see the Royal Winnipeg Ballet perform the Nutcracker, and I saw Evelyn Hart dance the Sugar Plum Fairy, and I pointed at her and I said, "Hey, that's me." And I was in ballet classes the next week.
Oh, wow.
And it just sort of took off, and to my parents' both joy and dismay, I was supposed to be a golfer and a teacher and somebody who did team sports, but I couldn't stay out of the studio. So it started as some ballet, and then did kind of the trio, the ballet, tap, or TBJ, tap, ballet, jazz for a little bit, those first couple of years, and then it expanded very quickly to starting into the ISTD ballet examinations, the English syllabus of ballet exams, when I was 5 years old, and somewhere around 7 added in jazz and lyrical contemporary and modern dance and hip-hop and acrobatics and sort of that whole Western dance style lens, you name it, we did it, with a very heavy focus on ballet. We did all of our exams all the way from primary all the way up to advanced 1, which was always kind of the main focus throughout half of the year. And then the other half of the year we would spend time in all those other styles doing choreography and bringing some of those styles to competition as well. And yeah, I did that in Winnipeg for about 15 or so years, 15, 16 years.
Does the studio still exist that you were at?
It sort of does. So ironically, it was called the Dance Centre, Winnipeg. So kind of a full circle that I spend quite a bit of time on the West Coast working at the Dance Centre. But it was a small studio. It was run by a woman named Joanne Carrick, who is an ex-ballerina. She danced the Royal Winnipeg Ballet. And there were several other teachers and students that kind of grew into teachers as well. That was part of the recognition of dancing and working there.
Beautiful. Thank you. Great. Yeah. And then you found yourself at York University. Is that correct?
Well, I did.
Not exactly found yourself, took yourself there, perhaps.
Yeah. Yeah. I moved studios partway when I was about 16, 17 and started training at another studio in Winnipeg for a little bit and kind of maintained roles at both for a while, and then took some time off after I graduated from school and saved up as much money as I possibly could and moved myself to Toronto in 2014 to attend York University for their dance, performance, and choreography program, as well as a certificate in dance sciences. And it was kind of my alternative option. Because in Winnipeg, either you join the Royal Winnipeg Ballet, you join Winnipeg Contemporary Dancers, or you move to Toronto or Vancouver. And so I, in my mind, said, okay, I'll go to Toronto, and then I'll go to Montreal, and then I'll go to Vancouver. And and that way I can dance till I'm 80 instead of retiring when I'm 30.
Yes.
And so, so I landed there, and that changed the course of my dancing forever, really.
Yeah, I was the same. I have a similar background, although decades earlier than you. So not as many dance styles were as available to me in the studios quite in the same way. Competition life, all of those things, a university life, you know, like there are chapters, aren't there, of like already you're discovering that chapters of how you engage in the dance form, how you engage in training, how you engage in research, and then how you work, like what your roles become inside that kind of container of the dance world. And so we've got so many areas we can talk about with you in terms of what you are up to now. But one of the things is maybe we can start on this journey of your personal history with how you came to be in Vancouver then, and what brought you to Vancouver, maybe career-wise or personal reasons-wise, as we start to unpack your your amazing foray into the Vancouver dance scene and beyond. Yes.
Most definitely. So I moved to Vancouver in August of 2021, and it was mid-pandemic, and somewhat in response to that feeling and sensation of I'd already been trying to get out of Toronto for a few years, and also spending all pandemic staring at gray sky on gray concrete on gray buildings on a gray lake, whereas I, in my mind, well, why couldn't I be beside mountains, oceans, and trees if I have to be alone? So that was one of the impetuses for the move. My roommate and I also we've lived together for 10 years now, and we've been quite influential in each other's careers and lifestyle and so on. And we'd both gone on tour with this dance company in 2018, where we traveled all over the western half of this land for the most part. But I ended up spending, we did pretty much the entirety of BC from Burns Lake and all the way down. So we started in Roslyn, went all the way up to Burns and Fraser Lake, and then all the way across to Winnipeg, and then all the way back, and then down the coast, and then ended up leaving the company after that. But I spent 3 more months on tour on my own, just with several contracts, and I found myself in Vancouver 3 or 4 times, and I was just in awe of this beautiful landscape with people that were so friendly and warm, and the opportunity to move and kind of just do things here. So I was really drawn to that, and that kind of confirmed that I knew I would move, that this would be my next stop after Vancouver. And then
what was the dance company called? Were you a founder of that company, or were you?
No, I wasn't. They're no longer in existence.
Okay, but that's what brought you over to the, to BC and to the West Coast, essentially. Yeah,
for the first time in my dance and professional career.
Yeah.
I'd been a couple times with family on ski trips before, but never to the coast, mostly to Fernie and that sort of area in the Kootenays. But in 2021, I had already begun a residency with Raven Spirit Dance. I'd connected with them a few times. I used to work at Native Earth Performing Arts in Toronto, so I had connected with them a few times, and they had invited me onto their inaugural Pakitanam program. So it's a choreographer's circle, essentially, and now it's a 1-year program, but when I was doing it, it was a 2-year program, and it was myself and 4 other choreographers from all across Turtle Island. And
Indigenous choreographers, is that correct?
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Yeah. And
Excellent.
so that was another reason for me to come, because I knew that there was that work and that it would be presented in December. And then I also had an invitation from Jeanette Horowitz, who was in residence at the dance center at that point, and I was invited on as a collaborator in her piece Quay. And so that was my first. We literally arrived in Richmond on August 27th. We took possession of our home here on August 31st. And August 30th, actually, I was in the dance center in the Marquise studio at 10 a.m. to 5 p.m., Monday to Friday. And so that was my introduction to dance in Vancouver.
Yeah, a second home for many of us, for sure. Yeah, if not our first home, actually, for many of us. Yeah, that's wonderful. And ever since, I mean, it's just, so there are so many layers. There's your work with Odella Arts and Olivia Davies as well. There's your own work. There's your collaborative work. There's the project that you're doing at the dance center on your own merit with your own collaborations. So many things for us to talk about. So I wonder if we should maybe just talk about that project before we get too caught up in all of the different hats you wear and some of the other things that we can talk about that you are outside of dance that you are also very much engaged in. So let's get to the work that you have proposed to the Dance Centre and that we will be seeing in September. I'd love for you to talk a little bit about that. I know we can find some out on the blog spot, we can find some out in the project description around the performance and things, but I'd love to hear it, and I know the listeners would, in your own words.
Of course.
Yeah, excellent.
This project is called Agrimony, and it's a dance and music collaboration with my dear friend Laura Resnick. Her and I have been working on it on and off for about 6 years now, and more intensively and regularly over the past year or so. And it actually all started in Vancouver in 2018 when I was on that tour. I had performed at a music festival a few weeks prior to coming to the city, and then the friend that I performed with was a filmmaker, and he said, we should just go to the forest and make some random dance footage. And I said, oh, that sounds great. So he's like, okay, well, on our way we'll stop and visit one of my creative collaborators' houses. And so we stopped at this person's house, and it turns out that I had met him at a different gathering a few weeks prior, just full kind of serendipitous layering of how we met. There's a whole portion about mangoes, of him holding a mango when I said goodbye, and then when we knocked on the door, he was holding a fresh mango. But anyway, so the filmmaker is
That's another story.
That's another story. But so like the filmmaker is Vicentonio Spinelli, and this artist who's a mask maker, and he makes the masks for our show. His name is Christian Borrego. So the three of us went to the forest with a mask that I had worn for this festival performance, and then Christian brought one of his own masks that he had made, which was this spiral mask with these big spirally ram-like horns, which is kind of the central image of the show. And so we made some footage, and then we all went on our merry way and didn't really think about it. And about 5 months later after that, Vita called me and said, hey, I have this friend. I was back in Toronto at this point. He said, I have this friend who's a musician, and she's thinking about quitting her career, but she has this one song, and she needs some footage, and it might be, say, her saving grace of going back into music. And I said, oh yeah, like give her the footage we made. I haven't even seen it. Sure. And then didn't hear anything. And another 6 months goes by, and he said, hey, that friend that we gave the footage to, she's coming to Toronto. She's going to be on CBC Radio or Studio Q. And, but her accommodation fell through. Could she stay with you? I was like, oh, of course. Sure. Why not? So she comes and stays with us and with my roommate and I, and lo and behold, it's Laura, and we become pretty well instant best friends. And then another chunk of time goes by. She comes and visits us and stays with us in Toronto quite a bit during that year while she's touring and so on. And then she, in the interim, realized that there wasn't enough footage for that. So her and Vita put together a grant to make a music video to go with this song that she'd written. And then she also received the JSR grant, which is the largest music recording grant you can get in North America. And it's $100,000 to write and record and tour a brand new album. So that was in the fall of 2019. Winter 2019, she spends 8 hours a day in Monarch Studios for the entire month of January 2020 and writes and records this album, which I'm a little bit biased, but I think it's a masterpiece. And then She came to stay with us in Toronto in February of 2020, and she received the first mixes of the album. And we listened to them in my living room and kind of put them all in an order. And that was pre-COVID times, just before as it was starting. And I happened to be in residence at the National Ballet of Canada at that point. And each day, as there was more announcements about Italy shutting down, I would lose a dancer a day. And it was just, all of a sudden, it was just me alone in the studio. And I didn't know what was going on at the time. So I was like, I'm not wasting my time here. Like, I'm going to use this for what I can. So I brought Laura to the studio with me, and she sat down at the piano and she started playing the music from the album. And I would just dance for hours. And then we realized that we needed to do something with that. So all to say, all of those layers kind of all fed into this creation that we have now, where the dream became that she would play the album front to back with a full band, and there would be a group of dancers that weave the entire album into a narrative.
Wow, that's amazing. And so what's the context behind the Agrimony flower?
Yeah, so Agrimony is the name of, or Agrimonia eupatoria is the Latin name for the medicine. And that month that Laura was spending with us, we were listening to the songs, we were trying to find a name for the album. And I had just had a cranial sacral therapy session with my practitioner based out of Toronto, and she also incorporates tinctures and flower remedies and natural medicine into her practice. And she gave me Agrimony that day. And it's in plant medicine, the flower of Agrimony is all about dissolving the masks that society asks us to wear, and that we're kind of forced to put on over time. And even the masks that, well, when you wake up and then you go to brush your teeth and then you leave your house to go to work, we put on different layers for different contexts. And so that medicine is sort of key in helping stabilize the emotional space so that we can start to remove those layers and really see what's underneath. And so when I told Laura that, she said, that's what all the songs are about. That is like all the lyrics, all of the context, all of the emotion for the last 5 years. That's what this album is. So
yeah, that's very exciting. And I think there's something really kind of like multi-sensory about it. Like I think it captures, doesn't it, the idea of the interdisciplinary, or the idea of all of the senses are involved in that. I've been thinking a lot about, and you'll appreciate this, I'm sure, with the many roles and hats you wear as well, that I think the different roles I have may have different faces. Like I think I may look different when I'm doing certain jobs and certain roles. And I've actually become like, I think I just, because it's kind of the mindset, a body set, a postural kind of, there's this, but it's also a preparation, it's like being able to kind of almost shape shift into these other things. And I'm sure it affects my face, and I'm sure people know which role I'm in when they meet me. Some of them who see me in more than one would know. So I'm sure that you're the same. Can we talk a little bit about, so you mentioned the craniosacral work. Would you mind explaining, or like talking a little bit about, you've already publicly mentioned a brain injury that you suffered. Could you talk a little bit about that? And maybe there's a connection to this work as well, but there's also, I feel there's a strong connection, and I'm sorry if I'm assuming, but there's a connection to the other kind of work that you also do, which breath work and massage work and all of those things. And I wonder if you would just spend a little bit of time talking about that connection and maybe bringing it back to your work.
Yeah, definitely. So in 2016, I sustained 3 concussions within the period of 6 months. And so I ended up having to drop, audited and deferred. I was at York at that point. So I dropped, audited and deferred my degree for, it was supposed to be, they gave me a 2.5-year recovery perspective healing period. And so it only ended up being about 10 months that I took anyways. Wow. And yeah, my whole life and body and everything was just mashed and jumbled and flipped upside down. It's interesting now, I feel way more solid in myself and my body after this amount of time, but for a good 2 years or so, like I knew who I was, but I wasn't the same person that I was before those. And I'm definitely not, I guess we're always evolving and always expanding and changing. And I fear the day that I don't change, I guess. But it was a drastic shift from who I was before and who I was after. And within that time, it was Really shocking. There wasn't really any. Now there's these fabulous concussion programs where you go in and you're assigned to a sports medicine doctor or a specialist, and they have different avenues and people that will all be in communication with each other and help you track your progress and figure out what you need. But they didn't have that when I had my concussion, so I kind of flew by the seat of my pants and just, as best as I could manage, contacted who I would and connected with different people. So I had a team of about 10 different people. And then I was the point person for all of them. So I just had this folder where I'd get people to put their papers in and I'd just bring that folder and hand it to the next person because I couldn't describe what was going on.
The middleman is your own, your own body.
But yeah, I worked with a sports medicine physiotherapist, a dance medicine physiotherapist, a sports medicine doctor. Who else is part of that team? I mentioned the dance medicine specialist specifically because she was really instrumental. She worked in the basement of York, so I would see her for 4 hours twice a week. And eventually what happened is we'd go up to dance class for 5-10 minutes every day, and she just helped me go from zero, from not being able to walk, to fully integrating back into my dance practice, which was amazing. But within all of that too, I started really digging into more not traditional, but more bodywork styles. So more than just the standard physiotherapy, which is what I was raised on and spent lots of time at the physio office in my young professional career. And so some of that was cranial sacral therapy with this wonderful practitioner. Her name is Linda Rose. She's one of my best friends in Toronto still now. I saw her twice a month for about 5 years straight. And then I also came to traditional Thai massage, was one of the things that I was having a lot of spinal complications, and those were kind of my two introductory places into the bodywork world. And when I got back from that tour that I was talking about earlier in 2018, I got back to Toronto in the middle of the fall, I guess, sometime in October, and for whatever reason, after having that richness of touring all over the country and dancing and meeting lots of people and meeting other people that did those bodywork forms, I just couldn't for the life of me bring myself to go back to my bartending gigs or my serving gigs, or I felt like I was pouring people poison. So I wanted to figure out a way to support people in a good way. So there's a place in Toronto called Bon Thai Spa, and they had a school called Bon Thai School, but their training was based out of ITM, which is the International Thai Massage School out of Chiang Mai. There was 2 Thai masters that worked at that spa that were the teachers as well. So I took 2 years worth of training with the Thai masters in Toronto and began practicing there. So that was an option to kind of go from student to practitioner on the mat. Planned a couple trips to Thailand that were supposed to be in March through until June of 2020. But that trip is still in the books eventually to kind of complete or continue the training and continue expanding.
Absolutely.
It's an amazing culture to become immersed in. There's a Thai community within Toronto that I had the honor to kind of dip into, and I dipped into that world and that work. So as I was studying and learning and practicing, I realized that I'd been kind of doing the baselines of that my whole life. I started teaching dance when I was 14, 15 years old, and stretching your students and being stretched by your students and pressure points and all of that. And I'd had a lot of acupuncture before, and it's all within the same wheelhouse. So it was a really natural kind of form to float into, which is kind of really, really neat. And then also being friends with Linda, she sort of started teaching me the basics of cranial sacral therapy, which fascinated me because it's so the opposite of Thai massage. So those were those 2 kind of like hands-on bodywork practices. And then one of my pandemic projects, I got really into I don't know if you've ever heard of Wim Hof, but he's just the Iceman challenges and all that stuff. So I became a pretty dedicated Wim Hofer for about 3 years, and did all that
ice baths and
daily breath work was one of the main features. So I really got into the breath. I did my first actual breathwork session in 2018 during that tour. That tour was really a big catalyst for everything. But in BC, in Nelson.
It's kind of a recovery. It's a recovery, isn't it? It's the process at the same time as you were recovering. This tour was happening, and so inevitably, the new you is like, kind of those 2 experiences are completely entwined. They were your everything.
They really were. They really were. Yeah, so I got into Wim Hof. I continued doing it after I moved to Vancouver, and then met a couple folks. There's a place here called the Stretch Space that's run by Carolyn Schmidt and Kian Dalton. And Kian's a Wim Hof certified guy, and Carolyn is a previous dancer, and the two of them do lots of stuff. So I befriended them and had a great. I started going there regularly, and then through them, I guess officially in person, I'd met who became my breathwave teacher, Robin Clements, and he's the founder of Breathwave. And so I kind of took a deep dive. I stepped away from Wim Hof under several recommendations and also just sensations and where I was going with things, and ended up going to do my levels 1 through 3 training for Breathwave of my own healing path, as well as the facilitators training and group training as well to facilitate Breathwave.
So do you still have to be careful around the concussions and all of that? Is that a thing that you have to manage like forever? Is it a physical thing, like, or do all of these things? I have two-pronged question before I forget. And one is around the health and managing the health side of things, and making sure you are like not pushing yourself too hard or forcing yourself into a position where it might happen again. And then the other one is if all of this work actually influences your creative, not that this isn't creative, but influences your artistic creative process and maybe what you choose to then create about, or even affect the aesthetic of the work that you're making. So there are two prongs there.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm interested in both. I think it's a fascinating space you are working in for that reason. There's a lot at stake, and then there's a lot of information you're bringing to a practice. So yeah, that's my curiosity around those two things.
Oh, thank you. As far as management of the health component of it, I've been a pretty well symptom-free. So the way that when I was going through recovery is they would track your progress through your symptoms and your symptom management. And so I've been symptom-free, quote unquote, for probably about 3 or 4 years now. There's two minor, sometimes they're major. There's two little things that have never left, though, is the sound of when a siren goes by, I have to plug my ears because it's able to just cut through my eardrum and into the weird part in my brain that just like my whole everything shuts down. My nervous system shuts down. So if I cover my ears, it removes a bit of the abrasion of it. And then the other one is if there's overhead lights that are extremely LED and extremely white, like that really cool tone and extremely bright, that's again, it cuts right into the top of my skull. It's very specific pinpoints within I can sense it exactly where it lands inside of my head. And it just, those two things have never really fully gone away.
One of the participants in a class that I teach for the UBC Brain Wellness Center, one of the participants mentioned that there was a particular song I was playing in my playlist that had a high note in it, high-pitched sound that meant, and she wasn't asking me to change anything necessarily, but I did because I was really interested in this, and if I could pinpoint where that sound might be or just help her anyway to kind of stay engaged in the class. But she mentioned that there was just one sound that meant that when she heard that, she was not able to move. And so it would actually, just like you're describing, take over, absolutely overwhelm her and her body so that she wouldn't be able to focus on anything else but coping with the sound. And so she would have to stop moving until it all went away, until it actually dissipated and everything. So I've worked really hard to try to find sounds that won't do that, won't go extreme. And I don't know exactly where it is, but I had that very experience with somebody who experienced that. So I just wanted to share that with you, that was, that's the first time I've heard of it like that, affecting movement. And so, yeah, that's an interesting space.
Yeah, thank you. You don't usually find people that have that experience, or it's like people who are severely concussed.
Right. Yeah, something. Yeah. And obviously, it's not exactly the same, but it's
no.
There is. She's also dealing with this. Yeah. So that's very interesting. Yeah. Great.
Thank you. Yeah. So, anyways, those are kind of the two things that really stuck. But otherwise,
Yeah.
Health wise and body wise, I still try to. I have a bodywork friend, magician in Toronto, who's also an ex dancer, previous dancer, and she actually grew up dancing. She moved from South Africa to Vancouver when she was in her teens, and she danced here for quite a few years, and then moved to Toronto. Whenever I'm in Toronto, which I tour there quite often and still maintain a few roles there, I always see her. I used to see her twice a month. I'd do cranial one week and then see her the next week, and then cranial the next week and then see her the next week. So I always go and see her, no matter what, even if it's for an hour, no matter, and it really kind of maintains that body work.
Great. Wonderful. Yeah. And we'll come back to all of your travels and all of your other roles in a second, but could you talk a little bit about how it may have influenced your practice? Maybe it's so integrated that it's just, it's maybe hard to articulate. I have a feeling you'll do a good job of articulating it though.
So as far as just literal bodywork and dance, it's in my letters of agreement with all of my dancers and all of my musicians that they are entitled. We have kind of like a care package where they're required to do at least 2 sessions with me. It gives them an opportunity to experience bodywork and weave bodywork into their physical well-being while we're working together in studio and process during show weeks, while it also allows me to understand where their bodies and spirits and hearts and breath is at. So I know how far we can go in the studio or how far not to go in the studio, and which territories we can go into, what kind of physicality we don't have to go into, and what would be supportive for the growth of everyone. So I think right now, choreographically, and it was something that was nurtured within me from a very young age. I had some really influential modern teachers when I was anywhere from the age of about 10 until 18, where we always had a voice in our choreography, we always had a voice in our solos, and the content, we would go really deep, just looking at weaving in poetry and music and ideas and philosophy and cosmologies, and just weaving it all into these beautiful practices. And so what they offered to me was this opportunity to expand and kind of level up every time. But especially since the concussions, I feel like it's become really amplified that I'm not necessarily interested in creating this beautiful, virtuosic, epic piece of something where everyone is perfect and technically amazing. I'm really interested in processes that allow anybody that's been layered in and welcomed into the circle or found themselves in the circle, for which we always joke to Agrimony, nobody's actually been hired into the show. It's the same layering as the mango guy thing.
Yeah.
That's again another set of stories that will come out during show week a little bit. But
cool.
Yeah, I'm really interested in what everyone has to feed and share, and where everyone's going, and not necessarily guiding and directing where everyone's going, but allowing what everybody's next steps in their physical health and their mental and spiritual and emotional health is, and where they want to expand to, and how can this cell amoeba thing that we're creating that will be witnessed by the public also, how does it resonate for us as a group, as a collective? How does it resonate for us individually? And how does it allow us to move forward in what we're dealing with the day to day?
I think there's also something really beautiful about that, because my practice is changing. It's evolving, but it's also I'm letting it change, and I'm having to be very patient with what that means, and I'm in a beautiful place with it, I feel right now. But one of the things that I think you're drawing out here is also how much we witness each other in a process, and how there are so many different ways that we can go about that, and how we can perceive we are being witnessed, or whether we're seeing it as looking at or looking with or being with, or like, just the words, and the words that we're using, the vocabulary we're using is expanding in terms of process in dance. It's having to expand. It's had to expand since COVID, and definitely before that, but it's been kind of almost enforced in some ways through the COVID experiences, and us all having to deal with that. And then there are the layers of funding and all of the layers of care that we have to have for each other, and all of those changes. So I feel like there's a definite connection there, but not just with the physical embodied or hands-on work, however stretchy that is, or pressured that is, or gentle that is. But there is also this sense of engaging with other people as witnessing their process, right? Isn't there? And allowing that to be whatever it needs to be. And I think that's the most delicate place in a way, especially for dancers, because we're actually relearning in some ways how to be in a studio, and learning from, for me as a white woman from England living in Canada, I'm learning from other cultures so much and other practices. And I'm learning about the longevity and sustainability and the history of these practices that have been going for likely way, way, way longer than the things that I've been introduced to in my life, or was introduced to when I was younger. So I just think there's such a wealth. It's so rich, and we can't possibly know all of it. But if we can at least energy wise feel like we can allow for those different energies to be in the room together and not force an energy, I think that's a beautiful thing, and difficult.
Very,
How do you find
very.
that as a creator or as a kind of leader or director? Would you call yourself that? Or...
I guess so. I see. As soon as I sit in the front of the room, we actually start every day in a circle. It's always, we have go in a circle. We have a little rock. We call it the sass rock. It's got 3 little holes that kind of look like a face that's giving other people sass. We pass it around, and we always start there. So I guess. But anyways, I guess I've been using the term creative. Somebody said creative producer, or I went to a really fabulous session at the Talking Stick Festival in 2022, and it was on creative producing, and I was like, everybody in the room, there's like, I don't know, 150 of us there, and we were all just like, oh, that's that person that does the choreography and sits at the front of the studio and is in the work too, so they're at the back of the studio and does send all the emails and pays everybody and writes the checks on the airplane. And I was like, oh yeah, I guess I do that.
We do, yeah, creative entrepreneurs sometimes.
Yeah, right. So creative producing, I guess, but it's really cool to take on those roles and find that dance of going between, when do I have to be the person with the stick, standing with my stick with my boots on the ground and driving it forward, and when am I stepping back to allow, when am I listening? And I think it's a really cool duality of, from receiving so much body work throughout before my concussion recovery, but also after it and during, stepping back and learning how to receive and allowing things to flow, and yeah, and then that dance of dancing back and forth of no, you need to drive this forward right now. Yeah. So for me, it's all just choreography. It's just a big choreography of energy, which I guess that's all choreography is in general.
Yeah. And this is kind of those wise words that we receive from, masters before us, and the people that we look up to, and the inherited kind of wisdoms, and then our own that we find as we, continue to work. Do you feel like collaboration then is an easy, like it's the same?
Yeah. I love working collaboratively. There's times and there's moments within this process where it is definitely, it is me going up and we're just setting things and changing things and making a lot of decisions. But as far as the energy and the music and the sharing and the baseline of the creation is very much, everybody's very quite embedded, and their souls are kind of woven into the fabric of it, which is really cool.
Yeah, that's wonderful. All of the other roles you do, you mentioned that you go to Toronto quite often and that you still work there with people. Can you explain that a bit more?
Yeah, so currently in my professional roles, I still am the artistic associate of the company called the Chimera Project. It's a company started in 1999 by Malgorzata Navaska-May, and I joined the company in 2018 as a dancer. I toured their show Omen with them for a season, and then I started in their company B Lab, so I was working with 5 or 6 of the different choreographers that came through, and then I shifted up into the company, and then COVID hit, and Mal and I we actually worked out every day together on Zoom.
Oh, that's great. Accountability partners.
Oh,
Love
it
it.
was great. It was awesome. And we would actually do that as our cross training before the pandemic on Skype, before anyone knew what Zoom was.
Yes.
It was because we had company members all over the country at that point, too.
Wow. Oh, beautiful.
So, anyways, Mal and I have maintained a relationship throughout that time. We've developed different programs online, and then she's more recently, as far as this project, as far as Agrimony, she said, well, okay, what's your dream project? And I said, well, that's when I was first starting to kind of foreshadow of what Agrimony could be beyond the little music video we made.
Mm.
I said, oh, well, I'd love to do this, and I'd love to present it at the Harbourfront Centre Theatre one day. And she's like, great, okay, we'll work towards that. So that's my kind of role as artistic associate there, and she's kind of my mentor, kind of an outside eye. She's been the outside eye on Agrimony for the last 3 years or so. She'll fly in and work on projects with us here. And then my other Toronto gigs, I am the creative director. I'm one of 5 creative directors, or 3 creative directors now, of Prince Edward County's Flight Festival of Contemporary Dance. Mm-hmm. So it's a contemporary dance festival that we started out in Prince Edward County in 2020, I guess. And myself and Arwen Carpenter and Kristen Foote and Carol Anderson, who was my professor at York University, who got me into the whole, she is the one that invited me into the team, and Jordana DeVoe. So it's been magical, and working on that every August. This is our first year. We're doing a little bit of a different year. I won't go too far into it, but it's been a really kind of cool community engagement work throughout the year, and we'll be doing a community performance at the end of September this year instead of a full stage festival. And then my third role that I'm currently fulfilling in Toronto right now is I've been dancing with Gahawi Dance Theatre, so Santi Smith's dance company, for the last... I officially joined onto the show Skana in August of 2023, but Santi and I we were on the same stage at Matriarchs Uprising in 2023 in February. It was when we kind of made our first full initial connection, and then ran into her lots and went to her land and did her summer Inviting the Land to Shape Us Creation Lab last year, and just many layers of connection.
That's great. It's Santi Smith.
Yeah.
So do you find that your project, because many people find this, don't they? When you're working on your own creations, they take a little longer, or you're fitting time in, but it doesn't make it's almost like a deeper process because of the time that it's more intimate somehow. And then do you find that even though the other processes might be amazing and wonderful and you're very involved, are they a bit more like on a tour schedule in order for you to fit all of these things in? Or how does it, are you just like a super time manager?
I think it's become the super time management thing. As far as for Santi's show, for example, we were in creation process. We did 1 week in October where we went to Upper State New York to film projections, and that was all process based and building sites and filming those sites, and we climbed a mountain one day, which is amazing, and filmed up there. And then we did 1 week together in December, which was also total creation process and kind of character building and starting from scratch. And then we did 1 week in January at the Bluma Appel Theatre and the venue that was presenting us. And then we did she was in Banff for 3 weeks in February, and then the dancers, me and the 2 other dancers, we joined her for the last 2 weeks in Banff. And so we did that was purely creation as well, plus a showing at the end. And then we did 3 weeks of creation process in April, and then our premiere was at the middle of May.
Oh, phenomenal.
So so there was a lot of creation. It's not entirely just, there are some things that are just touring. A lot of my solo work now is mostly just on the road unless I'm building on things.
Yeah, but that's a lovely way to do it too. You put the time in for those solos so you have work ready, and the easier ones to tour if it's probably not just you, but like a smaller team of people that you can kind of be responsible for scheduling, which is a lovely way to do it. Like it keeps that so you can not bartend, right?
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, it's wonderful. It's really great. I love this. So let's get back just to bring this to a bit of a close for now, and I'm sure we'll be speaking with you again, and I'm sure we've got time before your actual showing, but Agrimony will be shown in September, is that correct?
Yes, September 20th to 21st at the Dance Center.
Wonderful. And will you be in the Faris Theatre for
Yes.
It will be the full show pretty much. We'll have that's very exciting.
Yeah, full 65 minutes of sit-down performance, but a bit of an immersive experience as you enter. So
yeah, wonderful. That's really great. So that's really lovely. So what after Agrimony, what happens for you? Do you get your Harbour Front Centre performance? Have you already had that? Is that already something you've met? I believe you've won a nomination, a Dora Award nomination too, which I'd love to talk or you to like mention a little bit about. And then perhaps what do you anticipate is next, what you know is next, and what you'd like to have happen.
Oh, definitely. So our Harbourfront Centre dream did happen already. It was in April, and we used it as a stepping stone towards our big Vancouver premiere. So we did a 55-minute version of the show with 2 musicians and 4 dancers. Whereas the show and it was on a double bill, whereas the show in September is its own bill. It's about 65-ish minutes. It has a whole immersive gallery before you walk it, or as you enter, and it's got 6 musicians all on stage with the 4 dancers. So, so much. And a really great sound engineer and just brilliant production team, like my dream production team. So Jono Kim is doing lights, and Kaylee Sandomirsky is my stage and production manager. So shout out to both of them, dream team.
Wonderful. Yeah, great.
So that's September, and then I've got a pretty full schedule until December 2025. and, which I am so grateful for, and it's phenomenal to get to
give us a rundown, a quick little rundown, like 1 minute.
So we've got Dance West Network and the Recentering Margins Residency Coordinator. We are going to have our big showings. We have 6 artists in residence this year, so that'll be October 10th to 12th at both Morrow and at the Surrey Centre for the Arts. And then directly after that, I go into process with Compagnie Vinnie Dancy. So I'm the artistic associate there and have been for the last year or so. And we are preparing for a big performance of La Machine de Michif, which is a show that Yvonne produced at the Dance Centre.
Yvonne on this podcast about that too.
Oh, perfect. Full circle. So we're doing that. We're going to tour it to the prairies as well as perform it in Vancouver. And then we have a 7-city tour booked for that in June and July of 2025. So it's kind of processed and prepped. And then I'll be out in Toronto for a few projects. And then February 2025 will be Matriarchs Uprising, which happens every year. It'll be the 7th annual this year.
Woo-hoo.
And
that has a longer life now too, doesn't it? Because there are versions of it. I think there was something in Salt Spring recently too. So that's lovely. That is a breathing, living thing moving around as well. Many things to be juggling here. Wonderful. Sorry, I cut you off there.
Oh no, that's okay. Yeah, the Matriarchs Uprising is always the February one is the big one in Vancouver, and then we've been doing little satellite versions of it. So we did the National Arts Centre in 2023, and then Salt Spring a month ago. And
so many things.
Yes.
And your own solo work in the meantime, you have that.
Yes. So I'm currently in residence at the Shadbolt Centre for the Arts. I'm developing I have a solo called Journals of Adoption. I've been working on and off on it for about 10 years, and it's going from about 16 minutes to about 45 minutes this week. And so I think I'm anticipating a couple presentations of that in 2025.
I would love to talk to you about that again around that time. So.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that's wonderful. It's so exciting, Sophie. Congratulations on everything, and on your process of recovery and maintaining and finding ways to continue to practice through that and just managing it so beautifully and so well. Okay, well, this has been absolutely lovely. So lovely to connect with you this way, Sophie. Thank you so much for taking the time. Yeah.
Thank you so much for having me. This is I love thinking and moving and thinking in that moving kind of way, putting it all together. So thank you for
pleasure. It's so lovely, and I feel like it's quite vivid in my mind. Like all of the things you're working on and how you're working, and it's such a beautiful thing. So thank you. Wonderful.
Oh, well, I'm sure I'll see you or hear from you soon.
Yeah, definitely. I really hope to see you in the flesh soon.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you so much for listening. We would love for you to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts, as this will help other listeners find us and help us to grow our dance audience. We'll be back next month. In the meantime, you can follow us on Facebook at The Dance Centre, Twitter at Dance Centre, and Instagram at The Dance Centre BC. And if you'd like to support our work, please consider making a donation. Just go to our website at thedancecentre.ca, where you'll find extensive information about our upcoming programs and events. The music for the Dance Centre podcast was composed by James B. Maxwell. Always a pleasure to connect with you through dance. Until next time.